It started with something so ordinary, so simple, that it almost seemed harmless. A smell that everyone knows. The warm, comforting aroma of fresh bread. Inside the high walls of a South African prison, a new bakery had opened its doors. Prisoners worked side by side, producing nearly 4,000 loaves of bread each day. Bread that would feed their fellow inmates. Bread that would ease the burden on taxpayers. And bread that would give those behind bars the chance to learn a skill, something useful when the day of freedom finally arrived. On paper, it sounded almost poetic. Justice mixed with mercy. Punishment blended with opportunity. The kind of project politicians love to celebrate with ribbon-cutting ceremonies, speeches, and smiles. But behind the smell of yeast and flour, another smell lingered. A smell far less innocent. The smell of money. Big money. For years, South African prisons had quietly transformed from places of punishment into something else entirely. They had become factories, farms, workshops, hidden industries sealed behind barbed wire and concrete walls. Food was cooked, clothes were sewn, goods were manufactured. And those goods didn't just stay inside. They flowed outward, into the markets and into the pockets of those who knew how to play the game. Behind the curtain, deals worth millions tied prisons to private companies. And if the whispers were true, powerful political figures knew exactly how to dip their hands into that cash flow. To ordinary South Africans, the bakery was a story of hope. To the connected few, it was a story of profit. And then came the man who would strike the match. Pieter Groenewald. A minister who didn't quite fit the mold. He wasn't the type to shake hands in smoky backrooms or defend the old ways of doing business. He had a sharp eye and an even sharper will. Where others saw bread, he saw rot. And with the stroke of a pen, he would set off a political firestorm capable of shaking the ANC to its core. The decree was short. A few sentences on paper. Yet those sentences carried the force of an earthquake. Groenewald declared that every single prison outsourcing business in South Africa was finished. Decades of contracts, billions in influence, carefully woven connections between politicians, companies, and even crime syndicates, all wiped away in a single breath. The reaction was instant. The corridors of Parliament lit up with alarm. Phones rang non-stop. WhatsApp groups that usually buzzed with gossip now pulsed with rage. ANC ministers, long comfortable in a system that quietly paid them, sat frozen in disbelief. This wasn't a minor policy adjustment. It was a wrecking ball that smashed straight into the foundation of their empire. For years, outsourcing had been dressed up as rehabilitation. The public was told it was about hope, about giving prisoners a purpose and a second chance. But behind closed doors, everyone knew the truth. Those bakeries and workshops weren't just about reform, they were rivers of money. And Groenewald had blocked the river. Imagine the ANC caucus that day. Chairs scraping back. Fists slamming against wooden tables. Red faces, shouting voices, anger rising like steam from a boiling pot. How dare he? They fumed. How could a single minister dismantle an empire that had survived untouched for decades? But Groenewald did not budge. With calm resolve, he delivered his message. Prisons must be self-sufficient. No more middlemen. No more inflated tenders. No more private companies feeding off public money. His words were few, but they landed like thunder. He declared, prisons should be places of rehabilitation, not piggy banks for the powerful. The country exploded. To many, he was a hero. A warrior brave enough to break the pipelines of corruption. On street corners and in township kitchens, people whispered his name with cautious hope. Finally, someone was cutting off the thieves. But to others, he was reckless. A naive disruptor who didn't realize which toes he had stepped on. And those toes belonged to giants. The counterattack came quickly. Secret meetings stretched late into the night. Ministers huddled in backrooms, plotting their next move. Lawyers drafted threats of legal action. Old alliances, long dormant, reawakened. Their lifeblood, money, had been cut off. And in South African politics, when the money stops, the knives come out. The nation now faced a question. Who exactly was Pieter Groenewald? A reformer bold enough to confront corruption? Or a reckless politician willing to throw his own party into chaos? What was clear was this: he hadn't just changed a policy. He had declared war. And this war extended far beyond Parliament's red carpets. It reached into prison cells, where inmates wondered whether their so-called rehabilitation was ever real. It reached into corporate boardrooms, where executives once fattened by lucrative contracts scrambled to cover their tracks. And it reached into township streets, where mothers, workers, and students wondered whether this fight might finally, for once, be about them. For ordinary South Africans, it was simple. They didn't want more excuses. They didn't want leaders who grew rich while the people stayed poor. They wanted accountability. They wanted honesty. They wanted leaders who put people before profit. But for the politicians who had long benefited from the system, Groenewald's move was betrayal. And betrayal in their world demands revenge. Already whispers grew louder. Documents, payments, and hidden connections were said to exist. Names, powerful names, linked to these prison contracts might one day be revealed. And when that day comes, the shockwaves won't stop at Parliament's doors. They will ripple through the nation. That's why this moment was more than a policy shift. It was a crack in the armor of the system itself. South Africa had seen scandals before, resignations before, commissions of inquiry before. But this was different. Because when you lift the curtain on the prison money machine, you don't just expose corruption. You expose an entire system of greed, carefully protected, carefully fed, and carefully hidden. And Groenewald had just taken a hammer to it. The question now is brutally simple. Will history remember him as the minister who saved taxpayers billions, or as the fool who sparked a political war so fierce it could tear the ruling party apart? Because make no mistake, this is no longer just about him. This is about the soul of South Africa. About whether prisons will serve rehabilitation or remain cash cows for the connected. About whether leaders will continue to profit in the shadows or finally face the light of accountability. About whether ordinary citizens, the mothers who break a loaf into 5 pieces, the workers who wipe sweat from their brows, the students who bend over candlelight, will finally see politics that serve them. But as South Africa waits, the powerful are plotting. Behind guarded doors, deals are being struck. Phones buzz with coded messages. Alliances are formed and broken in hours. The same hands that once fed on prison contracts are now reaching for knives, preparing to strike back. And in a quiet office, lit only by the glow of a desk lamp, sits Pieter Groenewald. Calm. Unwavering. Almost as if he expected it all along. He knows the storm he has unleashed will not fade. It is only gathering strength. Every headline, every whisper, every angry phone call is proof that the fire has started.